Human stepped into the alien girl's ritual by accident. The crowd declared him her lifelong partner. Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's return to our main character. Ethan Carter was just an ordinary guy living a pretty standard life in a quiet suburban neighborhood. He had no idea that today would be anything but ordinary. It started like any other Saturday, with Ethan looking forward to his afternoon walk around the local park. But this time, his usual route led him to a section of the park he had never noticed before, a secluded area surrounded by tall, ancient trees, their branches twisted in strange patterns, casting eerie shadows. Curiosity got the better of him, and before he knew it, he had ventured deeper into the forest. The path he walked on seemed to change with every step, almost as if it was leading him somewhere. That's when he saw it. A group of people, all wearing intricate, colorful robes, were gathered around a large stone altar, their murmurs blending with the wind. Ethan froze. He had no idea who these people were or what they were doing, but something about the whole scene felt otherworldly. It didn't take long for him to realize this wasn't a normal gathering. The symbols carved into the altar seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, and the air was thick with an energy he couldn't explain. Before he could turn back and leave, a sudden shift in the crowd's movement caught his attention. One of the figures, a young woman with striking features and a presence that seemed to command the very air, stepped forward. She was unlike anyone Ethan had ever seen. Her long, silver hair flowed effortlessly, as though it had a life of its own, and her eyes shone with an intensity that could pierce the soul. Ethan instinctively took a step back, but his foot caught on a rock, sending him stumbling forward into the center of the ritual circle. A gasp echoed through the crowd, followed by whispers. The woman, who appeared to be the leader of the group, turned toward him, her gaze locking with his. It was as if time itself had stopped. The crowd fell silent, their eyes shifting between Ethan and the woman, waiting for something to happen. The woman stepped closer to him, her expression unreadable, and then, in a voice that was both calm and powerful, she spoke. "You have arrived," she said. Ethan, his heart racing, had no idea what she meant, but before he could respond, the crowd began chanting in unison. They circled around him, their voices rising in intensity. It felt like a dream, or a nightmare. The woman raised her hand, and the chanting stopped instantly. She turned to the crowd and, in a voice that seemed to carry the weight of destiny, declared, "He is the one." The murmurs of the crowd grew louder, and Ethan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. He had no idea what was happening, but one thing was clear, his life was about to change forever. "I will try my best to stay true to the style you want, and here's the continuation based on your guidelines." Ethan stood in the center of the ritual circle, his mind racing. The crowd's eyes were locked on him, their gaze intense, as if waiting for him to do something, anything. He had no idea what was happening, only that everything felt surreal, as though the world had suddenly shifted into a completely different reality. His heart thudded in his chest, and he found himself unable to move or speak. The woman who had spoken, the one with the silver hair, was now standing directly in front of him. Her eyes, bright and piercing, studied him with a look that seemed to go far beyond curiosity. It was as if she was searching his very soul. Ethan could barely breathe. "You are the one," she repeated, her voice calm but carrying an unshakable certainty. The words made no sense to him, but they stirred something deep inside. What did she mean by the one? What had he walked into? His mind struggled to grasp the situation, but the more he thought about it, the more questions flooded in. "Who are you?" he finally managed to ask, his voice shaky. The woman did not immediately answer. Instead, she turned to the crowd, her movement graceful and fluid, almost as if she were gliding. "This is the one," she announced, her voice echoing through the clearing. "The prophecy has been fulfilled." The crowd responded with a mixture of murmurs and nods, their expressions filled with awe and reverence. Ethan had no idea what prophecy they were talking about, but it was clear that whatever was happening here was of great significance to these people. As the woman returned her attention to him, she extended a hand. Her fingers were long and delicate, and as she reached toward him, he felt an odd pull, as though some invisible force was guiding his hand toward hers. Without thinking, he took her hand. A wave of warmth spread through his body, starting from his fingertips and radiating outward. It was unlike anything he had ever felt before, an overwhelming sense of connection, of being part of something far bigger than himself. "You are chosen," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper now. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. Chosen? Chosen for what? He had no answers, only more questions. The woman's gaze softened as she studied him, and for the first time, Ethan saw a hint of something like sympathy in her eyes. She wasn't a stranger to the confusion he must have been feeling. "The ritual must be completed," she said, as if that explained everything. Ethan felt his chest tighten with anxiety. He didn't know what kind of ritual he had unwittingly stepped into, but the fact that it had something to do with him made him feel uneasy. I don't understand," he stammered. "What ritual? What's happening?" The woman did not answer him right away. Instead, she turned to the crowd, nodding. The chanting began again, this time more intense than before. Ethan felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. He looked around, feeling the heat of 100 eyes on him, all waiting for him to play a role he had no idea he was meant to take. The woman squeezed his hand gently, snapping him out of his thoughts. "Trust the process," she said, her voice low but reassuring. Ethan was about to speak again when he was interrupted by a loud cry from the crowd. "The bond has been formed," someone shouted. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What bond?" The woman turned back. To him, her eyes softening. "You are bound to her now, as it was foretold," she said. "Your fate is no longer yours alone." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He felt a wave of panic rise in his chest. He had no idea what had just happened, but one thing was certain, his life was no longer just his own. It was part of something much larger, something he could not yet comprehend. Ethan felt the weight of the crowd's gaze pressing down on him, the quiet murmurs swirling around him as the woman with silver hair stepped back, allowing him some space. The chanting had stopped, but the tension in the air remained thick, almost tangible. He couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just been turned upside down, and there was no going back. "What exactly is going on here?" Ethan asked, his voice trembling despite his attempt to sound calm. The woman met his gaze, her eyes still as intense as ever. She seemed to study him for a moment before speaking. "This is the beginning of your new path, Ethan Carter," she said, her voice steady and soft, but carrying an undeniable force. "The bond has been formed between you and Aylin. It is a connection forged by fate, a link that will change the course of both your lives." Ethan looked to Aylin, who stood nearby, her presence as commanding as ever, yet there was a softness in her eyes that he had not noticed before. She looked, almost vulnerable. It was a strange contrast to the authoritative air she had shown moments ago. "Aylin?" Ethan asked, his voice catching slightly. She nodded, her lips curling into a faint smile. "Yes, Ethan. It's me. I know this is overwhelming, but trust me, you are not alone." The words seemed kind, but Ethan's mind was racing. He had so many questions, none of which seemed to have easy answers. The woman, Aylin, was not from his world. He had never seen anyone like her before, and yet, something about her felt familiar, like a piece of a puzzle he had never known he was missing. "What do you want from me?" Ethan's voice was almost a whisper, his heart pounding in his chest. "I don't know what this bond is, but I need to understand." Aylin stepped closer to him, her movements fluid and graceful, almost like she was gliding across the ground. She reached out, placing a hand gently on his arm. "You have been chosen to fulfill a role," she said, her voice low, almost hypnotic. "A role that neither of us expected, but it is one that cannot be ignored. This bond between us is not a curse, Ethan. It is a gift. One that will change everything." Ethan tried to absorb her words, but they made little sense. A gift? How could something he had stumbled into by accident be a gift? What role? "What does it mean for me, for you?" he asked, his confusion growing. Aylin's expression softened further, and for a moment, Ethan thought he saw a glimmer of sadness in her eyes. "The bond means that we are connected in ways that go beyond understanding. We are bound by something ancient, something that has been waiting for you. You are my lifelong partner, Ethan." Ethan took a step back, his mind reeling. Lifelong partner. What did that even mean? He had no idea what this ritual was, no idea what kind of world he had just walked into. But one thing was clear, the world he knew was no longer the same. I don't know if I can do this, Ethan said, his voice shaking. I don't know what any of this means. Aylin's eyes softened, and she took a step closer, her hand still resting on his arm. You don't have to understand everything right now. All I ask is that you trust me. This bond is not something you can fight. It is something you must accept. Ethan looked around at the faces in the crowd, all watching him, all waiting for him to accept this new reality. It was overwhelming, suffocating even, but he could see in their eyes that they believed in this, that they believed in him. Aylin's soft smile returned, and for the first time, Ethan felt something shift inside him. Maybe, just maybe, he could trust her. Maybe, just maybe, he could trust this strange new world that had suddenly become his own. Ethan's mind was still reeling from the words Aylin had spoken. Lifelong partner. It was a phrase he couldn't escape, a concept that seemed to belong to a world he didn't understand. Despite the surreal nature of everything happening around him, there was a strange pull inside him, a feeling he couldn't quite explain. Aylin's presence, calm and steady, was both comforting and unnerving. He wanted to believe her, but how could he? How could he just accept something so strange, something so outside of his reality? As if sensing his hesitation, Aylin gently squeezed his arm. I know this is a lot to take in, Ethan, she said, her voice soft yet firm. But you must trust that what has happened is meant to be. This bond, it's part of something much bigger than either of us. Ethan nodded, though his mind was far from settled. What is this, something bigger, he asked, needing answers, needing to understand. Aylin's gaze grew distant, as though she were looking beyond him, into some unseen future. The bond between us is not just a connection of two lives, she said slowly, it's a connection of destinies. My people have waited for centuries for this moment. And now, with you, it's finally come to pass. The crowd, still silently observing, seemed to breathe as one, their collective energy palpable in the air. Ethan felt a sense of awe mixed with dread. What was this ancient prophecy, and what role did he play in it? I don't even know you, Aylin, Ethan said, his voice filled with confusion. I don't understand any of this. How can I be part of something like this? Aylin turned back to him, her expression softening. You may not understand it all now, Ethan. But that doesn't change the fact that we are connected. The moment you stepped into that circle, it was as if the universe itself had chosen you. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. But I didn't choose this. I didn't choose any of this. Aylin's eyes locked onto his, her gaze unwavering. Sometimes, Ethan, we don't choose our path. Sometimes, our path chooses us. The words hit him harder than he expected, a deep truth that he wasn't ready to face. He wasn't sure if he was ready for any of this. What happens now? Ethan asked, feeling a sense of helplessness creeping over him. Now, you stay with me, Aylin said, her voice steady, almost reassuring. We must begin the next part of the ritual. It is necessary for both of us to fully understand the bond and how it will shape our future. Ethan swallowed, trying to process what she was saying. What do you mean, stay with you? He asked, anxiety creeping into his voice. Do I have to stay here with you? Forever. Aylin's expression softened, and she took a step closer to him. For now, yes, she replied gently. We must be together to complete the ritual. Only then will you truly understand the nature of our bond and what it means for both of us. I promise you, Ethan, once you accept it, you will see that this is not something to fear, but something to embrace. The crowd began to stir, their whispers growing louder, but Ethan could barely hear them. His mind was too focused on Aylin and her words. But what if I don't want this, he asked, the question hanging in the air between them. Aylin was silent for a moment before responding, her voice softer than before. Then you will walk away, and the bond will break. But understand this, you will never be the same again. The choice is yours, Ethan, but once you make it, there's no going back. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The weight of her words settled in his chest. The choice was his, but it didn't feel like a choice at all. It felt like destiny, or perhaps something even stronger. He stared at Aylin, her eyes filled with a calm certainty, and for the first time, he felt the truth of her words. Whatever this was, whatever had happened to him, it was not something he could simply walk away from. Not now. Not after everything. Okay, he said quietly, the word barely leaving his lips. I'll stay. Aylin's eyes softened, and she nodded. Good, she said, her voice filled with relief. We will begin the next step together. Ethan stood there, uncertain of what the future held, but for the first time since this whole strange journey had begun, he felt a sense of peace. Whatever lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure, he was no longer alone. Ethan stood silently as Aylin led him away from the ritual circle. The crowd had started to disperse, but their watchful eyes still lingered, as if they were waiting for him to make his next move. Aylin's calm presence beside him was both reassuring and unnerving. He had agreed to stay, but the truth was, he still had no idea what he had gotten himself into. As they walked deeper into the forest, the path seemed to open up to a clearing that Ethan had never seen before. The trees here were even taller, their trunks wide and ancient, their roots twisting in strange patterns that seemed almost purposeful. Aylin stopped and turned to face him, her expression serious. This is where it begins, she said, her voice steady. Ethan nodded, though his heart was still racing. What begins? What are we doing here? Aylin gave him a soft smile, though there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. We are about to begin the next part of the ritual. The bond between us must be fully understood and sealed. Until that happens, neither of us will be able to move forward. What does that mean? Ethan asked, his voice shaky. What exactly do we need to do? Aylin took a step closer to him, her gaze never leaving his. There is a ceremony, one that connects our souls. It will solidify the bond, making it real. Until it is done, there will always be a part of you that questions this connection. That is why we must go through with it. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process her words. A ceremony. A connection of souls. He had never believed in anything like that before, but standing here in this strange place, with Aylin by his side, it almost felt like there was no other option. And after this ceremony? Ethan asked. What happens then? Aylin's expression softened, and for the first time, there was a warmth in her eyes that made Ethan feel like maybe he wasn't as alone in this as he had thought. Once the bond is sealed, you will understand. You will see what you are meant to do, what our role in all of this is. You will no longer be confused. Ethan swallowed hard. He had no idea what that meant, but something about Aylin's words made him feel like he had no choice but to trust her. I don't know if I'm ready, he admitted, the words coming out more quietly than he intended. Aylin reached out and placed her hand gently on his. You don't have to be ready, Ethan. The bond will make you ready. Trust me, you're not alone in this. Her voice was filled with a sincerity that Ethan couldn't ignore. Slowly, he nodded. Okay, he said quietly. Let's do this. Aylin's eyes glowed faintly, a soft light radiating from them. She gave him a small, reassuring smile before she turned and began to lead him deeper into the clearing. The air around them seemed to hum with energy, and Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was about to happen. The trees around them seemed to close in, their branches arching overhead like a protective canopy. As they reached the center of the clearing, Aylin stopped and turned to face him. This is where it happens, she said softly. She raised both of her hands, her fingers weaving through the air as if she were drawing something invisible. Ethan watched, mesmerized by the fluidity of her movements. As she finished her motions, the air seemed to crackle with energy. Stand with me, Ethan, she said. Ethan stepped forward, his heart beating faster now. He could feel the weight of the moment, the gravity of what was happening. Slowly, he reached out and took Aylin's hands. A warmth spread through him, deeper than anything he had ever felt before. It wasn't just a physical warmth, but something deeper, something that touched his very soul. The moment their hands met, a surge of energy coursed through him, and for a split second, everything around him disappeared. There was no forest, no clearing, just a blinding light and the feeling of connection, deep, unshakable connection. Ethan gasped, feeling as though he were being pulled into something vast, something ancient. He could feel Aylin's presence beside him, her soul intertwining with his in a way that he couldn't explain. The world around them began to shift again, the light fading, and the clearing returned. But everything felt different now. Ethan wasn't sure what had just happened, but he knew one thing for certain: the bond was real. He could feel it, deep within him. And for the first time, he didn't question it. Aylin looked at him, her eyes glowing softly, and nodded. "It is done," she said quietly. "Now, you understand." Ethan nodded slowly, still overwhelmed by the experience. He didn't fully understand what had just taken place, but he knew that he had crossed a threshold. There was no going back. And somehow, he felt ready for whatever came next. Ethan stood there, still holding Aylin's hands, his heart still racing from the strange and powerful connection that had just sealed between them. The clearing around them seemed different now, quieter, as if the very atmosphere had shifted, adjusting to the new bond that had been formed. He glanced at Aylin, who was watching him with a quiet intensity, as if waiting for him to process what had just happened. "You feel it, don't you?" Aylin asked softly, her voice low and steady. Ethan nodded, his mind still trying to catch up with the sensations flooding his senses. "I don't know what I'm feeling," he admitted. "But it's real. I can feel it. I feel connected to you. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before." Aylin's expression softened, and she stepped closer to him. "That's the bond," she said, her voice filled with quiet pride. "It's more than just a connection, it's a part of us now. We are linked in a way that transcends words, a bond that goes beyond time and space." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. "I don't know what this means for me," he said slowly, "for us. I don't even know what my role is in all of this. But I don't feel like I can just walk away anymore." Aylin smiled gently, her eyes filled with understanding. "You don't have to walk away, Ethan. You never did. This is your path now. Our path." She paused for a moment, letting her words sink in. "There is much more to learn, much more to understand. This is only the beginning." Ethan swallowed, trying to wrap his mind around everything that was happening. The bond was real, he knew that now. But what did it mean? What was expected of him? What was this ritual, and why had it involved him? Aylin seemed to sense his unease, and she reached up to gently touch his cheek. "It's okay to be confused," she said softly. "This is a lot to process. But we have time. Together, we'll figure it out." Her touch was warm, soothing, and for a moment, Ethan felt the anxiety in his chest ease, if only slightly. He looked into her eyes and saw a depth of knowledge there, as though she had lived through countless lifetimes, each one preparing her for this moment. "What happens now?" he asked, his voice steadier now. Aylin stepped back slightly, letting go of his hand but still keeping her gaze locked on his. "Now we begin to learn about the bond, to understand its true nature. It will take time, but we will start with the most important thing." "And what's that?" Ethan asked. Aylin's gaze softened, and she spoke with a quiet confidence. "You need to learn to trust it, Ethan. Trust the bond between us. Only then will you fully understand your place in all of this. Only then will you be ready for what comes next." Ethan nodded slowly, his thoughts swirling with uncertainty but also a sense of determination. He had no idea what the future held, but he knew that he couldn't turn back now. The bond was real, and whatever it meant, he had no choice but to face it. "I'm ready," he said quietly, more to himself than to Aylin. She gave him a small, approving smile. "Good," she said. "We will take the next step together. One step at a time." As they stood there in the clearing, the world around them seemed to settle into a quiet stillness. Ethan felt a strange calm wash over him, as though the universe had shifted just enough to allow him to take his place in it. He didn't know what was coming, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone in this strange new world. Whatever the future held, he would face it with Aylin by his side. And that thought, for all its uncertainty, gave him a sense of hope he hadn't expected. The journey was just beginning, and Ethan was ready to walk it, no matter where it led. Ethan stood in the center of the clearing, the weight of Aylin's words still heavy in his chest. He had agreed to take the next step with her, to trust the bond between them, but as the silence stretched between them, uncertainty crept back in. What did it all mean? What was that next step Aylin had spoken of? He was still processing everything, the strange ritual, the feelings that had surged through him during their connection, and now the promise of something more, something unknown. Aylin seemed to sense his unease. Her gaze softened, and she stepped closer, her presence as calming as ever. "You're still not sure, are you?" she asked quietly. Ethan hesitated, then nodded. "I don't know what to believe anymore. Everything feels so unreal." Aylin's expression was gentle, but there was a depth in her eyes that suggested she understood. "It is a lot to take in, Ethan," she said. "This is all new for you, and it's natural to feel lost. But you're not alone in this. You never will be." Ethan swallowed, trying to steady his nerves. "I'm just not sure how to trust the bond. It's not like anything I've ever known before." Aylin nodded, her eyes never leaving his. "That's because this bond is unlike anything you've ever known. It's not something that can be understood with your mind alone. It's something you feel, something that grows stronger over time. The more you trust it, the more it will guide you." Ethan exhaled slowly, trying to let her words sink in. It wasn't easy to just let go of his doubts, to believe in something so intangible. But there was something about the way Aylin spoke, the way she carried herself, like she had walked this path before, like she had seen what lay ahead and knew that he could handle it, too. "How do I start?" he asked quietly, looking into her eyes. "How do I begin to trust something like this?" Aylin smiled softly and reached out, placing her hand gently on his chest. The warmth from her touch spread through him, and for the first time since the ritual, he felt a sense of calm, like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. "You've already taken the first step, Ethan," she said. "By staying, by being here, you've already chosen to trust the bond. It's not about understanding everything all at once. It's about allowing yourself to be open to it, to let it guide you." Ethan looked at her, feeling both comforted and overwhelmed by her words. "And then what?" he asked. "What happens when I trust it?" Aylin's smile deepened. "When you trust it, you will see the path laid out before you. The bond is not just a connection between us, it is a connection to something greater, something that will lead us both to our destiny. But it starts with you, with your trust in it." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words settle into him. He didn't know what was coming, but for the first time, he felt like he could face it. "I don't know if I'm ready for everything this means," he said, his voice quieter now, "but I'm willing to try. I'm willing to trust it." Aylin's eyes sparkled with a warmth that reached deep inside him. "That's all it takes, Ethan," she said softly. "That's all it takes. Now, let's move forward, together." As she spoke, the clearing seemed to hum with an energy he hadn't noticed before, a presence that was both calming and powerful. It was as if the very air around them was shifting, adjusting to the new bond that had been sealed. Ethan could feel it now, the subtle pull between them, a connection that was both unexplainable and undeniable. He had no idea what the future held, but for the first time since this whole strange journey had begun, he felt ready to face it. Together with Aylin, he would take the next step, whatever it might be. And in that moment, he realized that the bond they shared was more than just a promise, it was a new beginning, one he was ready to embrace. Ethan and Aylin continued their walk through the clearing, the air around them filled with an almost tangible energy. The moment they had shared, the bond that had been sealed between them, was still fresh in his mind, and yet, something in the air seemed to hum with an unspoken promise. He felt it deep within him, a sense of change, a shift in his very being. Aylin walked beside him, her presence steady and reassuring, but Ethan could sense the weight of something more in her silence. She wasn't just a guide in this strange new world, she was part of it, part of the journey they were about to undertake together. "What happens now?" Ethan asked, his voice low, almost as if he were afraid of breaking the spell of calm that surrounded them. Aylin glanced at him, her eyes warm but filled with a wisdom that seemed to stretch far beyond the confines of this world. "Now we begin to learn," she said softly. "The bond is just the beginning. There is much more that you need to understand." "What do I need to understand?" Ethan asked, his curiosity growing, though a small part of him still felt uncertain. He had taken the first step, but what came next was still a mystery. Aylin's gaze softened as she spoke, her voice steady and sure. "The bond we share is not just between us, Ethan. It connects us to something much greater, something that binds all of us together." Ethan frowned, trying to make sense of her words. "What do you mean? What are we connected to?" Aylin stopped walking for a moment, turning to face him. We are connected to the very forces that shape this world, to the ancient knowledge that has been passed down through generations. There are forces at work here, Ethan, forces that govern the lives of those who inhabit this world, and now, your life is intertwined with them. Ethan looked at her, his mind spinning. He had no idea what she meant, but the weight of her words was undeniable. He could feel it, this growing sense of something much bigger than him, something he couldn't quite grasp. I don't know if I'm ready for this, Ethan admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if I can handle this. Aylin reached out, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. You don't have to have all the answers right now, Ethan. You just have to trust the journey, trust the bond. It will guide you when the time comes. Ethan took a deep breath, trying to steady his racing thoughts. The journey, he had no idea what it would entail, but he knew, somehow, that it had already begun. He was no longer just an observer in his life, he was a participant, a part of something greater. What do we do now? He asked. How do we start? Aylin smiled, a small, knowing smile. We start by embracing the bond, Ethan. By accepting what we are meant to do, and letting it guide us. But first, you must understand that there are many who will not understand our connection. There will be those who will try to pull us apart, to question our bond. And you must be ready for that. Ethan nodded slowly. He had a lot to process, but one thing was clear, he wasn't just in this for himself anymore. The bond they shared was bigger than him, bigger than Aylin. It was part of something that stretched beyond their world, and it was leading them somewhere. The question was, where? I'm ready, he said, the words coming more easily than he expected. I don't know what this all means, but I'm ready to face it with you. Aylin's smile deepened, and for a moment, she seemed to glow with a quiet pride. Good, she said. That's all we need to begin. They resumed their walk, the path ahead still unclear, but for the first time, Ethan felt a sense of certainty. Whatever came next, whatever challenges awaited, he wasn't facing them alone. He had Aylin by his side, and the bond they shared would guide them through it. The journey was just beginning, and Ethan knew that no matter how uncertain the future seemed, he was ready to face it, together with her. Ethan walked beside Aylin, the air around them filled with a strange stillness. The world seemed quieter now, the weight of the bond between them settling like a gentle pressure on his chest. He still had so many questions, so much uncertainty, but for the first time, he felt like he wasn't alone in this strange new journey. Aylin had promised him that the bond would guide them, that it would lead them to where they needed to be. But where exactly was that? What was it all leading to? Aylin, he said, breaking the silence, his voice filled with curiosity, what exactly are we supposed to do now? Where are we going? Aylin glanced at him, her expression serene but purposeful. We are going to learn, Ethan. We're going to learn about the power that binds us, about the forces that we are now a part of. The bond is only the beginning. It's a connection to something far older and more powerful than anything you've ever known. Ethan nodded slowly, trying to process her words. There was so much he didn't understand, so much that felt out of his control. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that this bond wasn't just something he could walk away from. It was a part of him now, and there was no turning back. So, what happens when we learn about the power? He asked, his voice laced with uncertainty. Aylin turned her gaze to the horizon, her eyes distant as though she could see something beyond the trees, beyond the clearing. When we understand the power, Ethan, we'll be ready to fulfill our purpose. There are others, people like us, who have been waiting for this moment. Waiting for you. For us. Ethan felt a flicker of unease stir inside him. Others. What do you mean? Who are they? Aylin turned to him, her expression soft but filled with quiet strength. There are those who have watched over this world, who have protected it from forces that seek to disrupt the balance. They've waited for the right moment, for the right people, to step forward and take their place. You and I are those people, Ethan. We have a role to play in all of this. Ethan's mind raced. He had never asked for any of this, never wanted to be part of some prophecy or ancient force. But as the words sank in, he realized that this was no longer about what he wanted, it was about what he was meant to do. I still don't understand, he admitted, his voice quiet. Why me? Why are we the ones chosen for this? Aylin's eyes softened, and she reached out to touch his hand, her fingers warm and reassuring. because, Ethan, you are part of the balance. You have always been. The bond between us, it's not just something that happens by chance. It's the fulfillment of something that has been written long before we were born. You were always meant to be here, with me, at this time. The weight of her words hit him, and for a moment, he felt a surge of emotion he couldn't name. He had been thrust into something beyond his comprehension, something bigger than himself, and yet, in Aylin's presence, he felt like maybe he wasn't so powerless after all. So what's our first step? Ethan asked, his voice firmer now. What do we do first? Aylin smiled, a quiet confidence in her eyes. First, we begin to understand the power within us. The connection between us will guide us, but we must learn to harness it. Only then can we face the challenges ahead. Only then will we be ready to fulfill our purpose. Ethan took a deep breath, nodding slowly. He wasn't sure what the future held, but he knew one thing, he wasn't walking this path alone. With Aylin by his side, he would face whatever challenges came their way. Together, they would discover what the bond truly meant and what role they were destined to play. The journey was just beginning, and though the road ahead was unclear, Ethan felt a sense of determination rising within him. He was ready to embrace whatever came next.